Larry, Larry,
That's me. Hello. Hello, Your Excellency.
welcome. Thank you. Nice to hear from you. How is Brussels?
Well, Brussels is a bit rainy, a bit cold, typical winter weather, but the Christmas market has opened,
And
so that's always nice to get into the spirit of Christmas.
exactly, exactly. No, the same here. Very different from my country. We don't. Of course, people shop a lot. Mainly, it's the real week of Christmas, but it's trickling down these days. There are all those sales coming in, but we don't do this thing about everybody has to get a Christmas gift.
Well, it's funny that here in Europe, Black Friday has really taken over.
I tell you, that one is something else. I was like, wow, but that's capitalism,
Yeah,
really.
for
There's
sure.
always something that is has to be stored around a particular event after no, it was before Black Friday, it was Thanksgiving. It was
Right.
all costumes, and even before that it was Halloween. I'm like, oh no. So those people in those businesses are always making.
That's true. True.
So that's why the country always is always on a good economic footing. All right, I'm here.
Well,
I'm all yours.
okay, well, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak with you. Gail and I had met the first time at COP28 in Dubai and again in Baku at COP29. And I just recently came back from there.
Mhm.
And so my first question would be, of course, we're hearing now a lot of reports and analyses and opinions about COP29, about the outcome. Of course, a lot of disappointment, but I would be interested to hear, what your impressions are, what your takeaways are, some negative, some positive, but sort of what your overall view of how it went.
Of course, I wasn't there, but I was following closely, and my delegation was there from Malawi. I think COP29 to me was much more successful on one hand, particularly that at least the loss and damage fund, there's agreement on the new goal for financing, climate financing. To me, it's a sign that there's a common understanding among nations as well as other institutions, development banks, or international financial institutions, that there is a real existential threat by the climate change. And therefore, climate change disasters are hitting all our countries, whether we are developed countries or undeveloped countries, industrialized or not, they're being hit. I keep on observing here when California is hit by the cyclones, the whatever, the disasters that is caused is similar to ours. People disappearing, loss of lives, loss of destruction of various properties. So, the main point is that what I was happy with is that we are moving towards some consensus on we have a real threat to the whole planet, and we all need to protect the planet. We have different levels of contributions on how we can do it. The difference is huge in terms of financing, in terms of technology, in terms of capabilities, technical skills, technical know-how. But we all have to come together and do something about it. So to me, that's the part that is, but of course, what they say, we all, despite that we are contributing differently, we all have to contribute in terms of contributing to the climate disasters, the carbon emissions and what have you. We all have to also contribute as much to intercede, to mitigate, and also to adapt. So, of course, developing countries still feel that the funding levels are not enough. And I'm not very surprised, though, that at COP2 at the UN. So if we all commit to protect the planet, I think we all have to commit to do something about it. Now, on the side of countries like Malawi, the Global South, I think one thing that's clear is that we need more of the science, technology, and innovation skills so that we are also ready as having our own people, our own engineers, our own technicians, our own meteorological experts, our own technology innovators who can really innovate any of the technologies or early warning systems that will be consistent to our environmental context. Because if we rely on the global north experts to be coming to our countries, they're also busy in their own countries. We do need our people to have the skills and the expertise to do it. So technology transfer will be also key so that we are able to develop our own systems for early warning and early action. Imagine for Malawi, when we were hit by the worst one of Cyclone Freddy, we didn't even have enough of our rescuing equipment or even flights or for airlifting. We had to ask our neighboring countries to come and help us. So you can see to the extent to which we are not really ready to manage or mitigate or even adapt to this. So those are the issues, but I look forward to the fact that we have started better in COP29. I'm sure that moving forward, we should be moving slowly into a better position. Of course, we know that the new government here in the US may have different positions, but I'm sure this time around, they have seen what is happening in here. So they'll be able to come along with the multilateral system to agree on to identify the best solutions.
You mentioned, of course, capacity building and technology transfer. I hope there is progress made on capacity building. But looking ahead to the coming year and COP30 in Brazil, are you maybe hopeful that COP30 will be more successful, that there will be more progress made?
It all depends. You know, what's happening globally is that there were two wars. The war in Europe, the conflict in Europe, the conflict in Middle East have also diverted financing from different countries, including the European countries in particular. Inflation has really affected the living standards of people here. And in our capitals, it's even worse. With our struggling with debt sustainability, it's even worse. So my point, or what I'm trying to say, is that we will be struggling to recover our economies. If, for example, we go into next year with the peace in Middle East, peace in Europe, then the issue will be recovering. So maybe commitment to climate finance, which comes, of course, it's a disaster, may not be that much because every country will be busy also recovering from the impacts of the wars. But if all things being equal, there will be, hopefully, I can see, as I said, that there is that common understanding now that the disaster is there, the threat is there of climate disasters and climate change. And even the sea rise, it's also showing. It's also one of those impacts of climate change, and it's affecting all of us. We were surprised in Malawi Lake Malawi rose from nowhere after decades, and which is a sign that even if we are far from the sea, we are still part of the whole geographic linkage, and we were affected. So whilst we deal with the recovering our economies and, reducing inflation and improving on issues of basic prices and then issues of energy transition, we still need to put in more financing, more of our thinking and identifying solutions. Apart from financial solutions, it's technical solutions to this climate disaster. So certainly we'll have to do that, and I look forward to that. And the fact that here at the UN, we've had a Pact of the Future, which we all agreed upon and endorsed, our heads of state adopted it. We certainly, and climate change, adaptation, and climate action and financing is one of the commitments in the Pact of the Future. Certainly, countries are committed to take action on that. And taking action from a futuristic perspective, foresight perspective, will force people, will force countries, will force our leaders to really commit financially as well as materially, as well as I said, in terms of capacity building, whether in AI or technology, to make sure that we are ready for any eventualities of climate disasters. So I still feel that we are all very convinced from COP29 that we all have to take action. So I have the hope, I have the intuition that really nations will do something about it.
Well, I hope you're right.
I hope so.
On this question of climate finance, whatever amount will be pledged and hopefully delivered, it will not be enough to cover all your needs, but then have you already an idea of how much you would want to dedicate to adaptation, to loss and damage, to mitigation, to, you mentioned training, education, technology. I mean, there's just so much to cover that it's very hard to decide what is the most urgent need in terms of investment.
No, in terms of investment, the urgent need would be the agriculture sector, to be climate resilient agriculture. That's what we are really aiming for Malawi. And I think I would say for the whole Africa, because we need to make sure that our agriculture does return us in terms of food security. So our food systems would be climate resilient. Our agricultural systems, including, would be climate resilient. And we need to mechanize our agriculture system. We still use the hose. It's a long time. We need to get rid of that. If we are to produce more that can maintain our countries to sustained in terms of food security, we need to mechanize our productivity, our agriculture production. Just like we have learned from Ukraine, despite they are in war, we understand they've produced as much, despite the areas of production were less because the other fields were destroyed with war. They were able to produce as much and be able to even help us out there to provide some seed and to Africa. It's because they are mechanized. And this is why I'm talking about technology transfer, so that we can, one, produce, improve, or increase our productivity using mechanized agriculture. Two, we have to irrigate. We have to have irrigation technology. We should be able to use the irrigation technology, simple irrigation technology for our rural people, and also huge, big technology equipment for the commercial farmers. So we do need all that. That's why I was saying that if the technology transfer in terms of us buying from the various countries that are producing those technologies is difficult, then later our people become capacitated to be able to produce what technology can be used in our countries based on our environment. So we need the technology transfer in terms of skills, in terms of the actual technology. So that's why also the point I was talking about capacity is that here at the UN, we are already talking about science, technology, and innovation, because we have realized that we do need to capacitate the new generation, our people, in science, technology, and innovation for us to keep up with the digital technology, for us to keep up with what is happening with the climate. We need new science knowledge, new science thinking. I don't think the science we have is enough, good enough. That's why maybe we are being overtaken by the climate disasters.
I see. Now, you mentioned the importance of the agricultural sector for Malawi, and it has been very severely impacted by extreme weather, as we know. Can you speak to that? What the impact has been on your production, on food security?
Yeah, in fact, our production has been affected very, very much by the climate disasters that we've had. Sequentially, for over 3 years, we've had Cyclone Anna, Cyclone Gombe, and then Cyclone Freddy. These ones, they were really heavy rains with wind storms that were destroying crops that were already up, almost ripe to be harvested. They destroyed the land itself. With erosion, it means that the land becomes degraded in terms of the topsoil being gone. The animals as well. If people were doing animal husbandry, were washed away, people killed, and therefore families have to, some are gone, they are killed or lost, they are missing, or they are relocating, so they have to find another place where they can crop their, cultivate their crops. So all that affected the level of productivity in the country, and also storage of any food production or any agriculture production that was already there, which meant that even in terms of export, we couldn't export much this year because most of the crops were destroyed by the past few years. And the past harvest year, what really affected us was El Nino. El Nino is a dry spell, so most our crops died out because there was no rain. That's why I was mentioning that this is where we need a lot of irrigation technology, so that when it is known that we are hit by a dry spell, El Nino, another El Nino, we should be able to survive with irrigation. So Malawi, like many other countries in the Southern Africa, Zambia, and others, were affected in that way. And as I mentioned, the fact that we are not into large-scale farming, which of course Malawi has just started, we have just launched the mega farming, is that because we didn't have those large-scale farming schemes, we didn't have anything that was produced. So for us to replenish our silos, maize silos, we had to buy food from outside. Then that would also add on to the expenditure levels of the country, and also demand on the foreign exchange. Yeah.
I understand from Gail that gender is an important issue for you, the role of women. I believe they play an important role in the farming sector. how do you see their role in Malawi's transition? How can you empower the women to be more resilient and to contribute to the transition?
Yeah, in fact, that's a very good point. The population of Malawi, over 50% are women, but also our population is a young population. Almost 60% are young people. So we really have a demographic issue of people who, one, they are not, the women, many are not very educated. So most of them, much of our population lives in rural areas. So 80% plus lives in rural areas. And these rural areas are not accessible by many paved roads, and which means when they are hit by any climate disaster, they are not reachable. Those are the things that I talked about, that in the end, we have to airlift them, they have to be reached to be rescued. And therefore now, how do we empower them? My point has been that, and this is what I've been talking with Gail, is that we need the roads, rural roads, connecting roads, need to be paved. We need to have good bridges. And therefore, these women can easily travel to the markets, can easily travel to go and buy fertilizer, to go and buy seed, to go and, do other entrepreneurial activities over to other communities, even in the urban areas. As of now, they get cut off when it's rainy season. But the other thing is that these women, the fact that they remain in the communities, are the ones who remain with the children. By the time the climate disaster hits, they are the ones who are really running, trying to run with the children and escape. These are the ones we can empower with the early warning gadgets. But as I say, they may not be very educated. Would they understand those gadgets? Would they understand? But I understand they use colors. When this goes to this color, that means that you have a disaster coming, you need to move. They will be able to do that. And those would be the best ones to use for early warning. And then even early action, they would really take action quicker than maybe men who easily say, let's wait. We'll do it later. We'll move. I don't think the rain is coming. So that type of thing. But also our young people, I think I would add that the young people need to also be empowered. And this is where they need to have the skills in terms of science, technology, and innovation, so that they are the generation, the digital generation that can easily use their innovative ideas to do certain things, communicate faster through the digital communication on early warning of climate disaster. So we do need to have people-centered interventions, and therefore even the funding should be, we should consider more of adaptive, putting in more funds in the adaptation rather than mitigation, so that these people are already adapting and preparing for any disasters that will hit them. And they are prepared to know what they can do after that. But another thing I want to recommend for our countries, because as I mentioned, every country in the world is under pressure, is that our own countries locally can have what we can call climate response fund, which maybe I'll also recommend to my leadership that maybe we should consider that. Because if we have local climate response fund, the private sector and many others can put in that fund and be able to do some things on our own in case the Global Climate Fund is not forthcoming. Yes.
I would like to ask you about education. There's a World Bank study recently on the impact of climate change on access to education. And so you were speaking about these rural areas, and I can imagine that for children to get to school, it can be very challenging, especially if there has been flooding or other types of impacts on the roads and access to school.
Yeah, in fact, that has always been the problem. And because most of our roads do not have bridges, and even if we were to have the dirty road, but if there are no bridges, that's it. The kids stop going to school until the rains come to an end. And what would you expect when they stay at home? They will marry. They will marry early. So it goes on, then the cycle of poverty clicks in because they go into marriage early with nothing, with no food, with no whatever, and then they continue having children early and then they can't feed them. So the issue of roads, communication, access to climate disaster in terms of access to education is real. Even those who are destroyed by floods and all that, that they have to relocate, they get displaced. Where they go, there are no schools, there are no hospitals, there are no what, so they don't also stop going to school. Of course, the humanitarian relief organizations do create temporary schools, like UNICEF, they do create temporary schools, but how long will it take for them to do that? It takes a bit of time. The kids would have already lost a bit of time of education. So you can see that it affects everything else. The fact that the access to education is affected, then human capacity is affected in everything. We will not have good economists, we will not have agriculturists, we will not have scientists, we will not have all that. So yes, indeed, it affects it.
Well, now my last question would be a follow-up to the online event that was held back in February, which I was able to attend. It was convened by the Together We initiative, also UN Malawi, IMF, UN entities, I think other stakeholders. And so I remember in that event that it was explained how Malawi is moving forward in its vision and its fulfillment of the 2030 agenda, the SDGs. Could you share how that has progressed over the past year from your perspective?
Yeah, in fact, we have a Vision 2063 that has the 3 pillars of agriculture, commercialization and productivity, urbanization and industrialization. And we have, that one is 2063, but then we have a 10-year implementation plan. And all these are already aligned to the SDGs. So in fact, when they came to report on what we call voluntary national reviews, our plan, our national development plan, is aligned over 80% to the SDGs. Now, what that means is that our 10-year implementation plan, which is 2021 to 2030, as we are implementing the SDGs. Whilst funding is an issue, whatever we are doing, whoever financing partner or donor is contributing to our implementation of the 10-year implementation plan is also helping us achieve the Agenda 2030. So in the past year, I know, in fact, as I talked about the roads, we thank the US government. They gave us $350 million for rural roads, which to me, that will really unlock all these issues. And I've been told by our Minister of Transport that there are a number of rural roads that have been planned. There will be construction would have started immediately after the current rainy season, March, April. So these roads will already, as we have talked, unlock the opportunities of the rural populations to access markets, to take their produce to the markets, and also to access health facilities, to access education institutions, or even the other way around, is that people who are failing to open schools, to construct schools, to construct hospitals or health clinics, even the government or even non-government organizations like the churches, they will all be able to go to the rural areas following the people and create all their institutions and service provision points closer to the people. And this would automatically really have an impact on the SDGs. That's what we see coming up. And other development partners also have come in to help with the agriculture transformation, like EU recently just signed a number of agreements with Malawi. So under their global gateway, with that support, we are going to transform the agriculture sector and be able to move forward with the mechanization, as I mentioned, with the increase in productivity. And the mega farms, a number of them are being completed in terms of conceptualization, setting up, and this type of support that we are getting will really make them move. Maybe by next harvest, we'll have started yielding results from the mega farms. So the past year has really been something that has put the foundation of Malawi to springboard, to spring off to really the success line for SDG achievement. Even in terms of technology transfer, the UN Technology Bank is in Malawi doing a technology assessment, which will end up into a major strategic program of technology transfer by January, February next year. So all these, if they are well funded and also well capacitated by experts in the country on the ground, I think we are on the right track to achieve some of the SDGs. Because SDG 1, we are really struggling, which is poverty reduction, SDG 2 as well, hunger. As I said, we are currently in food insecurity crisis, and that's hunger, which means if we don't do well on agriculture and food systems, this SDG 2, we may not really achieve it, but we are prepared to achieve it. My government, my president has come up with a strategy, what they're calling ATM, agriculture, tourism, and mining. So these are the top 3 sectors that are being focused so that they are the engines of the economic growth of Malawi. And so that we can end up changing and even creating jobs for our young people and be able to move forward with SDG achievement. Yeah.
Well, I'm really happy to hear that you're getting that support from the US, from the EU, from the UN, because that shows a vote of confidence, in your vision for the 2030 agenda and your plans for economic growth. So that's encouraging, and I think that should really inspire other developing countries as well to follow your lead.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much, Your Excellency, for this conversation.